rich with a varied heritage reflecting the diverse potpourri of the early settlers. Go west, they said. Make a fortune in the new frontier. Discover the untouched prairie, a place to homestead and start a farm. Alberta, where the opportunities were as varied as the imaginations of the original settlers, where man learned how to farm the dry prairie soil, where oil and coal was discovered and the West boomed. All over the province are remnants of our early history. Museums, historical sites, and parks reflect the ethnic and social background of our province. In the beginning, the earth was created and life began to flourish. Life forms varied from the flora and fauna to the monstrous mammals of the time, the now extinct dinosaurs.
The Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology is located on the outskirts of Drumheller, a small coal mining town on Highway 9, the highway linking Calgary on the Trans-Canada Highway with Saskatoon. The Tyrrell Museum opened in September 1985, and already this museum has become one of Canada's most visited museum attractions. The building is a large one. It covers some 12,000 square meters, with a third of that space devoted to the public gallery. But before you get to that point in the museum, there is an introductory area, a place where the visitor can become orientated with the principles of physics and biology, which we understand to operate in the world today, but which have always operated on the ancient earth and which have always been constraints to the evolution of animal and plant life. So in this area, you will have the chance to play with interactive displays that tell you, for example, about the mechanics of jaw movements in marine reptiles, or the movements of rocks along fault plains, or other principles of physics such as buoyancy. But then the visitor moves up a ramp and gets a first full view of the two principal galleries of the Tyrrell Museum. To your right is the world of the dinosaurs. To the left is the aftermath era dominated by mammals, of course, which we're still in. In some of the world's more traditional natural history museums, dinosaur mounts are shown with lots of visible steel supporting structures and in rather straight type of poses. At the Tyrrell Museum, you see dinosaurs shown without any visible supporting structure because we have cored the vertebral column with a steel tube, and the supporting structure is hidden within the limbs. I think the other things that we do at the Tyrrell Museum to make the dinosaur displays more lively is to put them in very dynamic mounts. You see, for example, an Albertosaurus, one of the larger meat-eating dinosaurs, bearing down on its prey, the large body of a plant-eating dinosaur called Centrosaurus, and we do this in many parts of the gallery. In other parts of the museum, you'll see aquaria, which contain freshwater life, which has evolved very little since the age of the dinosaurs. Fish such as, or aquatic life such as garfish from the Mississippi, or soft-shelled turtles, or Congo eels, and other sorts of salamanders. And in another area of the museum, we take you into what's called a paleoconservatory, a large greenhouse containing some 120 species of plants from around the world, plants which have evolved again very little since the age of the dinosaurs. And then besides these fossil specimens and the aquaria and conservatory, we also supplement our educational message by means of pairs of computer terminals, where children and adults alike can discover the world of the dinosaur by learning more about them. You can build your own dinosaur. You can use our Encyclopedia of Fossils to find out a whole screen full of information about any genus or species which has interested you particularly while you've been walking through the museum. The public and non-public parts of the museum are in fact linked, so that at one spot in the gallery one actually has a chance to take a large-scale view into the fossil preparation lab, where you can see jacketed specimens taken in from the field being worked on for the first time since the initial stages of excavation out in places such as Dinosaur Provincial Park. So by these very many types of information transfer, we, I think, make a very different type of museum experience here. This is not a quiet place, it's not a a place where displays are behind glass cases. It's a very hands-on, interactive family enjoyment place where what appears to be an ever-increasing part of children's interest, that of the world of the dinosaur, is celebrated like no other museum on Earth.
Further south, just outside Brooks, is another place where our giant predecessors trod. Dinosaur Provincial Park abounds with the bones of these massive creatures, with a landscape rivaling a lunar wasteland.
Dinosaur Provincial Park is located 48 kilometers northeast of Brooks, Alberta. There are a number of things that visitors can see in the park in addition to the field station of the Travel Museum of Paleontology. Dinosaur Provincial Park is a World Heritage Site because of the fossil resources, the unique riverside habitat, and the badlands. Visitor services programs in Dinosaur Park are actually quite varied. There are a number of opportunities available for visitors when they come to Dinosaur Provincial Park.
The Travel Museum field station was conceived at the same time as was the idea of the Travel Museum of Paleontology. This facility contains lab spaces and offices where we can do fossil preparation, and there is a viewing window into the preparation lab here where the public can have a chance to see what goes on behind the scenes in terms of how we process some of our field jackets, our cataloging techniques, and this kind of thing. So one of the functions of the field station in terms of the displays is to try and explain to people what in fact the area was like at the time, what the geological processes are that were in the process at the time and are ongoing today, and also to give the public some idea of what the ongoing research is that we are involved with in Dinosaur Park at this time.
The days of the caveman are remembered at Writing on Stone Provincial Park. Here, our ancestors left their mark on the rocks by the river.
Writing on Stone is about an hour and a half south of Lethbridge. The park got its name because of the pictographs and petroglyphs that are found on the stone cliffs in the park. These are what we call petroglyphs. They're carved into the sandstone rock. These ones here, we refer to them as shield men. We date these prior to 1730, 1750, somewhere in that neighborhood. For the most part, this isn't really a recreation type park. It's more along the lines of a historic park. Most of the people that do come here come for that specific reason, is to see the pictographs, petroglyphs, and whatnot at the park.
Located in the southwest part of the province is a more recent historic site. The head smashed-in buffalo jump represents more than 5,000 years of use by the native people of the area.
Head Smashed In is located about 18 kilometers northwest of Fort Macleod, and the Head Smashed In buffalo jump, which you see behind me, is probably the most important buffalo jump in North America. It's certainly one of the oldest. It goes back for 6,000 years. And for 6,000 years, people were driving buffalo over this jump. And in fact, the activity only ended around early 19th century. Under my feet here on the hill that we're actually standing on is some 35 feet of bone deposit that has accumulated as a result of these buffalo hunts over the last 6,000 years. A lot of the tourists who come here are really interested in the native lifestyles, and in this area, of course, it's Blackfoot lifestyles and Blackfoot language and Blackfoot people. And to this end, all our guides are Blackfoot-speaking people. In other words, they're either pagan or blood. And they've been trained from scratch by ourselves, and they're doing very well indeed. And we know we're getting some extremely good responses from the tourists about our guides and how happy they are to see that we have native guides at a site which is, let's face it, fundamentally a native site. This site, which was a provincial historic site back in 1978, was eventually declared a World Heritage Site in 1981 by UNESCO, and we have certain responsibilities associated with that. We have to be very careful how we treat this site, And the head-smashed-in building, which was put in as an interpretive center to recognize the importance of the site, is virtually totally buried within the cliff face, so that we don't diminish or take away from the natural aspect of the head-smashed-in jump. The interpretive center itself is 7 stories. One of the first exhibits that the visitor will see when he comes through the front door is a cliff with some stuffed buffalo poised to plunge from the top. And in fact, the height of the cliff is about the same height as head-smashed-in would have been. On the wall next to the environmental exhibit is a very large mural which was painted in Calgary, and you can see that it has illustrations of the sort of animals and flora that exist around here. We're very proud of this mural. It's a very pretty one. The 82-seat theatre here is used to show 3 times an hour, show a movie which was made here, which is basically a recreation of the buffalo hunt. I think the visitor will find it really interesting to get some idea of what a hunt actually looked like at the time.
The natives lived off the spoils of their great buffalo hunts for many years until the great herds thinned and the white man made his appearance. It became a white man's world, and then as people arrived from the east, forts were built to house the immigrants.
Fort Calgary was built in 1875. The Northwest Mounted Police Force, which had been established the year before, came out west to the land that had formerly been occupied and controlled by the Hudson's Bay Company to set up a series of forts so that the government, federal government presence would be right here in the west. And the original 1875 palisades were constructed where I am standing today. In the early 1970s, interest grew in commemorating the site of the original Fort Calgary. There was an archaeological dig on this site which established where the original palisades of Fort Calgary were. A decision was made originally not to reconstruct the fort, but to actually mark the original palisades with timbers. And that's what we have on the site today. A decision was also made to construct on the site an interpretive center, which would be a museum dedicated to the early history of the fort and the fort site, where citizens could come and through a series of visual displays learn about the origins of Fort Calgary and also the origins of the Calgary community.
Further to the south was the notorious Whiskey Fort. Originally known as Fort Hamilton after its financier, it soon became commonly known as Fort Whoop-Up. When Dave Akers couldn't get his price for the fort from the newly formed Northwest Mounted Police, they continued to the east and built their own fort.
The town of Fort Macleod is located just an hour and a half south of Calgary, and the town site is just a few miles southwest of the original town site. Fort Macleod plays a very significant role in the history of Western Canada. In October of 1874, 150 of the newly formed Northwest Mounted Police arrived here under the direction, the command of then Assistant Commissioner James Farquharson McLeod, and established a fort on an island in the Old Man River, just northeast of here. The museum here was begun in 1957 by a group of very far-thinking individuals, and what you see here is meant to represent the original fort. We have an original building, our sod-roofed building, the Canoes House, which was an early trading post. Our museum deals with three main areas, that being the history of the Northwest Mounted Police up to the RCM, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the history of the Indigenous people of this area, and the early European settlers of this area. We have significant displays on each of these groups of people. During the summer, we have several programs in operation. Of course, we have our world-famous Fort Museum's Mounted Patrol Musical Ride, which operates from July 1st until August 31st. We have 4 rides a day, and we also have several slide presentations which are shown after the Mounted Patrol performances.
The settlers continued to arrive and towns sprang up. The buildings reflected the diversity of the people who came from all corners of the globe.
The downtown revitalization of Fort Macleod has actually been going on for many, many years. Just recently, through Alberta lotteries, through Alberta Culture, we have $1.75 million to restore and revitalize our downtown area. We have 55 buildings in the historic area, and about 33 have been touched upon, whether it's signage, painting, or complete restoration.
The immigrants migrating to southern Alberta came from many religious backgrounds. A large group came from the state of Utah and settled in the Cardston area. A hard-working farming and ranching community, but also devout believers. They built a monument to their faith.
The Alberta Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is situated on a central hill in the center of the town of Cardston, Alberta, Canada. It is an architectural wonder piece that was started in 1913 and finished in 1923 and dedicated. It is made of granite, and which was brought from British Columbia, and is built in the form of a Maltese cross. So each side of the temple appears the same. And we have pictures of some of the rooms in the temple which we can show tourists as they come.
With the changing face of the prairies came the changing face of transportation. Carriages and the automobile made their appearance with a flourish of elegance. With the age of elegance came the lifestyle of a people trying to recreate their homeland. Men of Vision is a statue overlooking the ranch land northwest of Calgary. One of these men of vision was Senator Matthew Cochrane.
The Cochrane Ranch is located just west of Calgary on the number 1A highway. It takes about 20 minutes from the outskirts of the city. The Cochrane Ranch is the site of the first large-scale ranching operation in Alberta, and it had a great impact on Alberta's economy to begin with, because it started a ranching industry, and it made way for settlement and also gave a reason for the railway to come into this area. Tourists would come to the ranch to enjoy the outdoors and also to learn a little bit about ranching. We do have a visitor center which has a small museum in it. We have a slideshow presentation up there, and there are interpreters up there that can tell you about the history of the ranch, and there are artifacts from the site.
The changing face of the prairie is now remembered in museums all over the province. A museum in Lethbridge celebrates the diversity of the early settlers and the beginnings of coal mining.
The Galt Museum is known as one of the finest small museums of its kind in Canada. The main gallery, in addition to generally talking about community development and history, specifically talks about the early introduction of coal. It also expresses the wide range of ethnic diversity and change that has occurred in Lethbridge as a result of the amount of migration of people that have come in for coal mining and for agriculture, and because of the two wars.
Hailed as one of the best museums in Canada, the Glenbow Museum in Calgary takes you on a colorful, kaleidoscopic trip through the history of Western Canada.
My name is Kate Davis, and I have the pleasure of working at the Glenbow Museum and telling you today a bit about it. It all started with the magnificent collection of Eric Harvey, who in 1955 established a foundation. If you start up on the 4th floor of the museum, this is where we have an incredible mineralogy collection, gemstones, ores. They're almost like little bits of artworks in themselves because they gleam and glow, as well as they give us a feeling about the earth. Also on the 4th floor we have the military section, armor, medieval armor, coats of arms. We even have a exquisite collection of samurai armor. If you then walk down onto the 3rd floor, basically the 3rd floor gives us the development of our history in Western Canada. We start with the first native peoples, beautiful artifacts, art objects, and cultural objects that help us understand and appreciate the lifestyles of the Cree, the Ojibwa, the Plains Indians, the Inuit, all the way through into when the first white settlers and the first white people started to come west, the RCMP, the missionaries. We even have a bit about the rebellion that happened with Métis and the Red River Rebellion. The nicest thing about the Glenbow is that there is definitely something for everyone. So please come down to the Glenbow and enjoy the collection and the exhibits.
Discover Alberta's history for yourself. The past comes alive through displays and interpreters who show you our heritage. Your trip through time will show you how this province became what it is today. For a vacation this year, take an Alberta break.
Take an Alberta break, take a break, get away from it all. Take an Alberta break, where the break you take is right here in your own backyard. Get away, get away, take an Alberta break, where the break you take is right here in your own backyard. Yeah.